On today's show, this Dallas Mavericks starting five that they're going to start the year with is the best one in Dallas Mavericks history. That's a hill I'd die on. We'll tell you more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
You are Locked On Mavs.
Great, Rusty.
Your daily Dallas Mavericks podcast.
No one's dying.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Amazing.
Your team every day.
Still can't even help me.
And welcome. You're Locked On to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show. Making Locked On Mavs your first listen today with the best way you can help us grow the show. Listen every day on any podcast platform. Leave us a 5-star review. Take us with you. Like the video on YouTube and comment anything below. Comment below a hill you would die on about the Dallas Mavericks, or if you think that this Mavs starting five can be the best in franchise history. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get 3 free-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And joining me from the great Slightly Biased YouTube channel, with glasses filled with love. What you got for me, Slightly Biased?
You don't know what hill I'll die on?
Tell me.
This intro music is good.
We'll be able to let it ride to this.
I think so too.
You'll die on that hill. Today we're talking about hills we would die on in the NBA. We're gonna each bring a couple of Mavs kind of takes or hills that we would die on, and talk about that. I'll talk about the Mavs starting five that I think is pretty good, and then we're each gonna bring a couple of NBA takes. We're gonna expand and broaden our horizons today and talk about the rest of the NBA. I've got one on Joel Embiid today. I've also got one on the Clippers and how we need to go after the Clippers a little bit harder for the last couple of years. So we'll talk about all that. But let's start here slightly. My first one, a hill I would die on for the Dallas Mavericks. I had not really thought about this in great detail, but I had thought about this Mavs starting five. They, have Luka and Kyrie, obviously, probably the best duo in Dallas Mavericks history, talent-wise. You start looking around, you go, all right, Dirk and Jet, Dirk and Nash. You start going through it, and you're like, okay, I think
Blackman and Aguirre.
Rolando Blackman and Mark Aguirre. You go to Dirk and Josh Howard, both made the all-star team. They're the only ones. And then you're like, okay, Luka and Kyrie, that's probably the best talent-wise duo. And then Derek Lively, if he takes a step forward, PJ Washington, great role player. And then you had Klay Thompson. And depending on what he can be, this Mavericks starting five could be one of the best in franchise history. And then I see this tweet from Mavs Nations or MFL Nations, so shout out to him, posting that this is the best starting lineup in Dallas Mavericks franchise history. And he came out and made this statement that this is the best one. And so I started to think through it. I started to go through the best starting fives they had, because I think I agree that this on paper has the potential and should be the best starting five in Mavericks history. Just initial response to this being the best starting lineup.
It's really hard to say that when this franchise has a championship under their belt, but this team will 1,000% be competing for the NBA Finals, and I think on paper it's definitely up there because Luka and Kyrie are the best duo the Mavs have had just in terms of talent. Because you talk about all the Dirk ones, and Dirk obviously fantastic, but some of those guys like Nash wasn't Nash until he left. He was still great with the Mavs, made 2 All-Star games with the Mavs, but he wasn't, MVP Steve Nash until after he left. And, Josh Howard's just a really good player, but wasn't Kyrie Irving, of course, Brunson wasn't Brunson until he left. So it's definitely possible. I mean, I look back, you look at that starting five from the finals, and, JJ was starting. Like, JJ was in the starting five, and I love JJ Barea, but, that was a roster that was just so well constructed in 2011 that
you start to go. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, talent wise, I think this one could sort of surpass that. Yeah, but it'll be tough.
Yeah, I think my take is that it has the chance and should be. I think that's sort of the thing, because we haven't seen it yet. Obviously, I can't make the statement that it is, but I think that it should be, because you start to go through some of the ones you just mentioned. You go, all right, well, what about 2011? They won the title. All right, well, the Jason Kidd, Deshaun Stevenson, Sean Marion, Dirk Nowitzki, Tyson Chandler starting five. Yes, they won the title. They had a 57-25 record. That group, though, how many games do you think they started in the regular season? That group together. Remember, you had the Caron Butler injury. You have the moves back and forth, starting Deshaun, not starting. You had Jet. You had different things like that.
I would guess maybe 10.
Yeah, guess it. Everybody guess at home. They started 4 games together. So can we really say that is the starting 5? They started 18 playoff games. So yes, it eventually became the starting lineup. They were 14-4 in the playoffs, but they only played together at all 6 games in the regular season, like starting or not starting. It's kind of wild that became this lineup that we all look at as one of the best in Mavs history. Now, it was very good, but you mentioned it. They made the Deshaun Stevenson for JJ Barea swap in the finals. So that didn't end up being the starting 5 that they ended with either to win the title. So you take that one. I think if you do the starting 5 that they originally had, the Jason Kidd, Caron Butler, Sean Marion, Dirk, Tyson Chandler, that one on paper is definitely one of the best ones in Mavs history, but we never even saw that one, but maybe like one game.
Yeah.
You go to like 2006 when they made the finals. They didn't really have a consistent starting 5. They were 67-15 that season. The starting 5 they started the most was Jason Terry, Adrian Griffin, Josh Howard, Dirk, and Deshaun Diop. And they started 21 games together. And the next highest starting 5 only started 10 games together. So like they didn't have the Mavericks have not had very consistent starting 5s in their history. Start going through some. I did so much research on this because I really wanted to be right about this. I think the 2024 starting 5 that the Mavs ended with that went to the finals has to be mentioned. The Luka, Kyrie, Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford one. That's only 2 players different than what we're talking about now, and we think it got better. But they were 22-9 to end the season. They played more games than either of the other finals starting 5s like combined.
I think the 2006-2007 one would have to be mentioned because that's the one that won 67 games.
Yep.
Lost round 1.
Jason Terry, Devin Harris, Josh Howard, Dirk Nowitzki, Eric Dampier. That's a great one. 67-win season, like you said. They were 37-6 when they played. They've played 43 games. So you're like, okay, that was probably a pretty great one.
That's Dirk won MVP that year. That was the year Josh Howard made the All-Star game. Devin Harris got Defensive Player of the Year votes. Like that was a good one.
But they lost in round 1 to the Weebly Warriors.
Round 1.
So you're like, okay, well that probably disqualifies that one. So now you look at some of the older ones too. Let's go back to 2003 is an interesting one. They went to the West Finals. They were 60-22. It was Steve Nash, Adrian Griffin, Michael Finley, Dirk, and Sean Bradley. That group only played 20 games together. And so they didn't really even play that many. That team in 2003 had 7 different starting lineups in 20 playoff games.
Dang.
They were thrown around. It's kind of wild. 2002, when they won a bunch of games, they had 25 different starting lineups.
Jeez.
Which is insane. Just so there really hasn't been that many consistent starting 5s in
that
Mavs
seems
history.
about normal to me, though. I'd be interested to see how many lineups teams average per season.
25 is a lot, I think. But you look at you look at this season. All right, what do they have to do to become the best starting 5? To me, I think if they win a title, obviously, I think that if they win a title, they play more than half of the games. I think that solidifies this group.
You got to win the championship. I mean, I don't even want to. I don't like to entertain any. This player is better than this player in this franchise's history, and you guys know what I'm alluding to. Until championships are won. I mean, that's how the sport is played. Like we have a championship in this franchise's history, recent history too. Like most of us. Well, I'm hoping if you're listening to this, well, I guess you could be 13 years old. But I'm hoping most of you were alive to witness it. So you got to win. That's it. If they win, then yes, they will have a very good argument, especially because they made the finals a year ago.
Mavs last year started 35 different starting 5s, by the way.
Yeah, but I know by like the trade deadline, they had more starting 5s than anybody in the NBA. Right. So last year was just crazy.
It was a lot. So yeah, that's a hill I'll die on. Is I think this starting 5 should be the best in Mavs franchise history. They definitely have the chance to be, and it should be the best starting 5 if you start.
I just remember something so embarrassing. I remembered when the Mavs made the Rondo trade in 2014. I thought that starting 5, I remember thinking and telling my friends, was one of the best starting 5s in the history of the NBA.
It was the Rondo, Monte Ellis,
Chandler Parsons,
Dirk, and Tyson. It was one of the best. It was the best offense in NBA history at one point, right?
That was before the Rondo trade, and then it tanked, I think. But that was young, dumb me, excited.
Much more seasoned and grizzled now.
Yes, much more depressed.
You've been hurt by takes. You've been hurt by takes too many times. Coming up, he's going to get hurt again. We'll talk about a hill that Slightly would die on. And then I've got something to say about the Clippers' last 5 years. We need to slander them a little bit more, and I'll tell you why coming up.
You don't believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has all kinds of props and odds and things that you can use to get in on the action. FanDuel, you've heard us talk a lot about it. It's America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little bit different for you. Right now through September 22nd, so you've got some time left. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3 free-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is Google account, current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And you know that 3 weeks is all you're going to need because 3 weeks gets you right about to the start of like NBA preseason and all that. And then like we'll be checked out of the NFL by then. So you just need the 3 weeks. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. Go to FanDuel.com and see what's available for you. All kinds of NBA stuff, NFL lines like that. Go check out FanDuel.com. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. For your second listen today, listen to Locked On NBA. I'm there on Thursdays. Go listen to Jackson Gatlin. He had Tony East on to talk about the Pacers. He'll have a bunch of other guys to talk about the NBA with. And if you want to hear some more NBA thoughts, 30 minutes or less, wherever you're listening, watching this, go check out Locked On NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Slightly Biased. I gave my hill that I'm going to die on. The Mavs starting five has a chance to be the best in Mavs history and should be the best in Mavs history. What's a Mavs hill you're going to die on this year?
Well, it's not like necessarily this year, but I guess it's all tied together. And
let's do your 50 how many wins?
All right.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I think this Mavs team, and I guess it correlates to what you were saying about their starting five, but we talked about their over-unders. It was 50.5, and I don't know if that's changed since we talked about it or not, but I think that's very low, and I think the expectations for this team should be a mid-50s win team. So 55, 56 wins and competing for the #1 seed. I look at this roster. I look at what they've done. I looked at how they played towards the end of the season, and I don't see how they're not hitting that range, assuming that they're healthy, which is, of course, a big question mark. But, I mean, they weren't really healthy at all last year, and they still won 50 games despite dragging for 2 months of the season, waiting for trades to happen. So I feel this team's always aggressive at the trade deadline as well, looking to improve their roster. I think that this will be a mid-50s win team and fighting for the 1 seed. So I'll die on that hill, I guess.
If you had to guess where FanDuel has their over-under, you mentioned it was 50.5 before. If you had to guess how they adjusted it since then, we all talked about it. We all hit the over and over again. Where would it be, do you think?
Well, I'm assuming since you're asking, they dropped it.
49.5.
Really? I was thinking that I feel like once people sit down and start thinking about it, that smart money would actually go towards them hitting the over.
You would think so. However, Dallas Mavericks regular season wins 49.5. If you think they're going to win 50, or like slightly, if you think they're going to win 50, like 55, 54, 56 games, then obviously take that over on there. I'm with you. I think that this team has a chance. I think they have the chance to be one of the best starting fives. You look at some of the starting fives, a lot of those teams I mentioned, they won 60, 67, 55, 58, 57 games. And for this Mavericks team, that's right there. Unless it's a season like 2 years ago where the #1 seed in the West wins 53 games and it's all evenly spread out throughout everybody and they all just beat each other up in the West for whatever reason. And they're not as many tanking teams as in the past. Then yeah, they should win 55 games. This should be the best Luka era regular season team, right?
Yes, 100% it should be. I'm just, what's the argument for them not reaching 50 again? I mean, I don't understand this whatsoever. This makes no sense to me at all. What their regular season win total right now, it feels like the one that makes the least amount of sense to me out of any of the ones I see.
Yeah, it would have to be like they really don't believe in the Klay Thompson thing. You really don't believe in Kyrie with injury luck. Yeah, but even then,
you'd really talk yourself.
Yeah, you have to really talk yourself into a bunch of different things. There's not one narrative that gets over it. Man, the best team in the Luka era regular season wise was 52-30. That was the 2022 team that went to the West Finals. And so if they get to mid-50s, this would be the best Luka era regular season team.
Yeah, and I mean, at some point, it feels like every regular season recently has just been injuries or huge midseason trade deadline shakeups that have sort of altered the team, the trajectory of the team. Like at some point, there's going to be, a pandemic. At some point, there's going to be a Boban dropping 30 points when the season came to a conclusion. But at some point, there's got to be just a stable season where the team is relatively healthy. There's always going to be injuries, obviously, but the team is relatively healthy. And I'm sure they'll make moves at the deadline. They've made a trade at the deadline every single year of the Luka era, some bigger than others. Yeah. But at some point, they're just like, this is our team, and this is who we're rolling out with. And I think this will be the year. I can't see why. I mean, I don't – even going into that year where they traded for Kyrie, we kind of knew that if the opportunity presented itself for a second star, they need to go out and do it. And we knew going into last year, if they still needed another big – like, there's just not too many questions about this roster right now. So I just can't. I mean, 49.5. What are they look? I don't get it. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. All the money is on the over. I really don't know why they lowered that. That's really weird to me.
Strange. All right, let's move to some of our NBA hills that you're gonna die on, and I'm gonna die on this hill with the Clippers. The Clippers' last 5 years needs to be talked about as a bigger failure than the KD, Kyrie, Harden Nets or some of these other big time failures that we've talked about in the past. This duo gets together, Kawhi and Paul George. They trade all this stuff for basically to get both of them to come in. They played 5 seasons together. They had the 6th best record in the regular season in those 5 years, which first of all is not indicative of having 2 like MVP type players. Paul George has been 3rd in MVP. Kawhi is, finals MVP twice. They won 3 playoff rounds that whole time together. 2 of them were against the young Mavericks, with like a 20 and 21-year-old Luka Doncic. Yep. And then they had a top 5 coach in Ty Lue. They brought in Harden for a year. They had Westbrook. They had Norman Powell, Zubats, Batum, Marcus Morris, Lou Williams, Reggie Jackson, Robert Covington, Patrick Beverley, like when he was still kind of good. And so they had a bunch of guys and role players. And they also, to throw more slander on the fire, they lost SGA, who's going to win an MVP. Like this failure by the Clippers overall should be talked about as a bigger failure. But when I still feel like we talk about the Nets as a failure, the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett Nets, I feel like we talk about as a bigger failure. Why is this Clippers one not getting as much slander?
Because I don't think it's set in for most people that it is over.
It's
like
done.
I think some people still think that it is over and done with. And I'm happy you said that, because like a week or 2 ago, I did something on stream where I regraded all of the big moves over the last 5 off seasons. We got the 2019 off season. I ended up giving the Brooklyn Nets a B+, and they won 1 playoff series together.
Yeah.
Right. But at least the Nets can say we got out of the Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden thing with like 20 draft picks, like just a huge haul of draft picks. Like they were able to recoup assets that they lost during all of that. And I think you could really make an argument that the Nets win the NBA Finals if KD's foot wasn't on the line. Like that's a very real thing that happened.
It's such a wild what if.
Such a wild what if. 100%. I gave the Clippers one a D-. The only reason I didn't give it an F was because just for a brief moment, the Clippers, who had often been casted aside as this failure franchise, little brother in LA, got the 2 huge free agents, got Kawhi Leonard, got Paul George. They were relevant.
Put their name on the map.
It was them and the Lakers. And not only did it not pan out, I mean, that last series against the Mavericks was the last time Kawhi Leonard finished a playoff series. Like, that's actually insane. The bubble collapse where they were up 3-1 in the second round against the Nuggets was the last time those 2 played in a playoff series together and completed the series. Like, that was the last time those 2 finished the playoffs healthy. And then it's Paul George hurt, Kawhi hurt, and it's over. I mean, their championship window slammed shut. And all of that stuff they got for Paul George, nothing in return. He leaves for absolutely nothing in free agency. You trade for James Harden. Have to imagine if you were to blow it up, I'm saying, what is Kawhi Leonard's value at this point? You have to ask that question. Never on the court, ever, when in the playoffs when it matters. And what's James Harden value? Dirt. Like, James Harden has no value anymore. So just I mean, I think it's because people don't fully understand that it is done. Like they are going to be a 40-win team, and that's that.
The case, if I'm going to try to play devil's advocate, would be, well, it was worth the shot. I feel like that's what a lot of people say with this Clippers teams. Well, it was worth the shot. You might as well take the chance, do that, put your name on the map, try. They also put their fans through just an incredible amount of, all right, stop and go, where you're just running back the same team. You try with James Harden, you try to get a point guard, you try to do this, bring in Westbrook, you do all this stop and start, and have they generated a lot of like fan interest? And now they're starting with this new arena. And the team is probably the least interesting it's been in the last 5-6 years.
I think you can maybe make the argument, though, that would there be enough interest to move out of, crypto and get their own arena if it weren't for this era? Maybe not. And I think what makes it worse is, the Paul George trade ending up being just Shai Gilgeous-Alexander alone. And what point in that trade did it become, I wouldn't trade Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for Paul George straight up? Was it like 1 year into it?
Definitely by this year. I mean, he's
sure by this year,
second MVP, and a couple years in, probably 2 years in.
And then one of those picks, the 2022 first round pick was J-Dub, and you're not trading J-Dub straight up for Paul George right now. I'm telling you,
you're not.
No team is doing
Jalen Williams. No.
So that's just brutal. And there's still 3 first round picks left to convey in this.
The thing that'll get it is the reason why we talk about the Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett trade as bad as it was for Brooklyn, and why we still clown Bobby Marks every time he comes on a podcast and talks about trades and for like being part of that, is because they got Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown out of that.
Yeah,
they got 2 high picks. They got both of those guys, and now they've won a title, and they'd been to finals and stuff like that. If the Thunder go and win a title, then this Clippers trade and the Clippers collapse and all that, by giving them basically both those guys, SGA and Jalen Williams, the same kind of thing with the Celtics, is a similar failure. And I think that's absolutely wild. Coming up, let's talk about, I got a couple other NBA takes. Slightly's got some. I've got another one on Embiid. We'll get into all that and more coming up.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
All right, Slightly, we're talking about hills we would die on. I talked about the Mavs starting 5. You talked about the Mavs over-under with their wins this season. I talked about the Clippers need to get more slander, which is a well I'll keep going back to. Give me one of your NBA takes right now, or NBA hills that you're willing to die on.
Well, one of my NBA hills was going to be the Clippers are in the worst spot out of any NBA franchise in the league by a comfortable margin.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think who has it worse, because you're done. You're not winning. You're not competing. And you don't have your access to your own picks. And it's like the players you have on your roster aren't good enough to really like trade for a king's ransom anymore. So
but they're not bad enough to bottom out and get a Cooper Flag either.
Right, but I mean, even if they wanted to, they couldn't.
Yeah, which they wouldn't get.
So I struggle to think of who has it worse in the league than them currently. But so that was one of my takes. But
is it the Hornets with LaMelo Ball like peeling out of the parking lot every?
Well, at least with the Hornets, they have their picks, and you do have LaMelo, and Brandon Miller was just
got some interesting young guys for sure. No, I'm just
right, and I mean that's another thing too. The Clippers, young talent on the roster. I mean, you're just banking on these dart throws. And they're desperate. I mean, you don't go get Josh Primo. You don't go get Kevin Porter Jr. You don't go like just tying yourself to these young guys that do have some promise, but also have a ton of baggage if you're not completely and totally desperate.
If Alex Sarr is as bad as he looked in the Summer League, is it the Wizards?
No, because the Wizards still have their picks. They still have other people's picks. Like they could bottom out this year and get Cooper Flag. Boom. They're automatically better than the Clippers, future-wise. Like, I'm looking at each roster. I don't think it's even close.
Who would have thought? Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in, especially with Harden. He's going to be 35, 34.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard's not getting any younger. Some of the role players. And then they held on to the Terrence Mann piece for a long time. I was listening to Locked On Clippers, Darian, the other day, and he was saying, was it the right choice for them to just keep holding on to Terrence Mann and not giving him up in certain trades every year? And he came with like, yeah, it was a better decision. I was like, I don't know about that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you could make the argument that if they were healthy, and I will say 2021, if Kawhi does not tear his ACL round 2, they probably win the NBA Finals. But, the difference between Kevin Durant's foot being on the line and that is different because Kawhi's hurt every single year.
That's what it came down to. It's a huge what if, but I mean.
Oh, I think he's one of the biggest what ifs in NBA history, which is crazy to say because he's a 3-time champion and a 2-time Finals MVP. So it's like kind of crazy to say that he's a huge what if, but I do think he's a massive what if.
Well, he's gonna finish his career, and we're gonna look back at it and see this 2-time Finals MVP that was a 2-time Finals MVP, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, 6 All NBAs. I mean, we're gonna look at him like one of these like a Bill Walton type player. We look back and go, oh my gosh, he only played like 4 or 5 seasons, but he was insane in those seasons, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could have been a top 10 player ever.
Yeah, and he wasn't that great early on. He averaged 8 points a game his first season, in San Antonio.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a Kawhi defender just because how unbelievable he is when he's playing, but it has reached the point when it's just he doesn't play anymore. And it sucks. I mean, watching him in that series against the Mavs, those 2 games was sad. Like that was actually kind of sad to see.
Yeah, he's going out. Well, he was just hurt, and then
hurt.
I remember sitting there. I remember sitting there on the sidelines, like watching him warm up, and just like staring at his knee, just like how's he dealing with it, all that, and it just looked real slow. You're right.
He had that play where he went up for that lob and was hanging on the rim during the timeout. Remember, people on Twitter were like, "Oh, Kawhi's like feeling it," and I'm like, "He's scared to drop to the floor."
Yeah, that's why he's hanging onto the rim.
There's no like feeling anything. Like he's worried about feeling something in his knee. That's why he's hanging on the rim.
Also, he's only a 2-time champion, but he also was the All-Star MVP in 2020. So I just wanted to throw that.
I think he was on 2 Spurs championship teams.
Yeah, it seems like he was, because wasn't he on the team that played LeBron with the Ray Allen shot?
Yeah, I mean he won Finals MVP that year.
No, the Ray Allen shot one was the one where they lost.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was the 2013 one.
Yeah.
Anyway, my last quick one. I think Embiid will never make an NBA Finals. He's not made an Eastern Conference Finals yet.
I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, but he will be 31 years old by the time the next postseason starts.
Man.
And considering his play style, this is why I've actually, at first I was like, the Paul George contract was kind of gross to me, but over time, I've really warmed up to it because the Embiid window might be 2 years. Like you talk about Paul George.
Yeah.
That contract will look 4 or 5 years from now. It might not matter at all because that window just might be closed. So they're just going all in right now. And I like it. I mean, they got a good chance this year. They got a good team.
He hasn't had like the crazy season-ending injuries like he did at the beginning. He missed the first 2 years, played 31 games his first year, but he's played 60, 64, 51 twice in the shortened seasons, then 68, 66. Last year played 39, but then came back. He didn't look that great, but yeah, you are just kind of waiting for it to all like collapse for him. But yeah, he'll be 31. And my point is that Boston's going to beat them this year, right? I can't see the Sixers beating the Celtics. Maybe it happens. The Knicks, I think, are going
on the other end of the bracket.
Yeah, the Knicks, I think, are going to be better than them this season.
You said he won't make an NBA Finals or Conference Finals?
An NBA Finals. I almost went Conference Finals, but I gave him that. I think he could make it this year.
Yeah, I think he can make it this year if he's on the other side of the Celtics bracket. It's tough to imagine them beating the Celtics, but you never know.
The Bucks could rebound this season, and I don't know that I would pick the Sixers over the Bucks.
You also kind of had to think about some of the teams that have made the conference finals. It is kind of insane that the Sixers
Hawks
just haven't fallen backwards into one. And then it's like, at some point, it feels like some luck will come their way.
The problem is he falls down and doesn't get back up.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean,
and then you got the Pacers. If they've ever faced the Pacers last year in the regular season scored 126, 132, and 134 against the Sixers last year.
Well, God, hopefully the Mavericks never play the Pacers in the finals.
No, or ever again.
Yeah. Jesus.
And then like the Magic are rising, the Cavs are solid. Like the East is getting better around them. So we'll see what with Paul George, but I'm not really looking at Paul George as like the playoff savior for them after the last couple of years.
True.
Last couple of years with him.
They just need him to be better than Tobias Harris. Is really the way you got to look at it. You still got Maxey, who was going crazy in that series against the Knicks.
See. I just don't think they'll ever make the NBA Finals. Tomorrow, Slightly and I will bring out some more hills that we'll die on in the NBA and for the Mavericks. For me, I'm going to talk about how Derek Lively is going to be the second best player from his draft class, and I'm going to die on that hill. Feeling real confident on that. We'll talk about more stuff tomorrow and break that all down. We'll have NBA takes as well. Guys, thanks for hanging out with us and listening to Locked on Mavs. Come back tomorrow.
Peace out.
Boom.
Peace out.